Naam, ni tarehe 6 mwezi Oktoba mwaka wa 2022. Mahali popote ambapo ulipo, hujambo na karibu katika taarifa za Mwanzo TV, tukikujia moja kwa moja kutoka jiji kuu la Nairobi. Mimi naitwa Victor Wanaswa. Tumekuandalia mengi katika taarifa zetu za ufasaha na utendeti, ikiwemo taarifa kuhusiana na uamuzi ambao umeweza kutolewa na spika wa bunge la kitaifa nchini Kenya, Moses Wetangula, kuhusiana na ni upande upi au mrengo upi ambao uko na idadi wa juu zaidi ya wabunge katika bunge hilo la kitaifa. Vile vile tutakuwa na mchanganuzi wa masuala ya kisiasa, Profesa Tom na Mwamba, ambaye atakuwa anatusaidia katika kuchanganua na kupambanua uamuzi ambao umeweza kutolewa na spika huyo wa bunge la kitaifa, Moses Wetangula. Kando na hayo, vile vile tutakuwa tunakuarifu na kukutaarifu kuhusiana na mashirika ya kiraia nchini Kenya, jinsi yanavyoendelea kushinikiza serikali ya taifa hilo kuweza kurejesha marufuku dhidi ya vyakula vya GMO nchini Kenya. Hivyo basi, na kusi mtazamaji, uandamane nami kuanzia sasa hadi tamati, ila tunikumbushe kwamba unaweza kufuatilia taarifa hizi katika mitandao yetu ya kijamii, kwa maana ya Facebook, Twitter na pia katika ule wa Instagram, ambapo tunapatikana kama @Mwanzo TV Kenya. Na pia nakusihi sana uweze kutembelea ukurasa wetu wa YouTube, uweze kubonyeza kidude cha kengele na kuweza kusubscribe katika YouTube yetu ya mwanzo.com, ndiposa usiweze kupitwa na lolote kuambatana na taarifa ambazo zinachipukia nchini Kenya, nchini Tanzania na Afrika kwa ujumla. Hebu sasa mtazamaji, tuanze na taarifa yetu kuu, ambako ubabe au utata wa uongozi katika mirengo ya kisiasa katika bunge la kitaifa umetatuliwa leo hii baada ya spika wa bunge hilo Moses Wetangula kuamua kwamba muungano wa Kenya Kwanza ndio una wabunge wengi. Spika huyo amesema Kenya Kwanza ina wabunge 179 huku mrengo wa Azimio ukiwa na wabunge 157.
This being the very first sitting of the Senate under the first session of the 13th Parliament. The day today is October 4th, the year is 2022. A broadcast made possible through the collaboration between the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation as well as the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit. A lot is a task that will be undertaken by the Senate majority leader, and this particular committee is quite necessary as the Senate has to have the composition of this business committee in place before it can transact a business before the floor. And this is pursuant to the standing orders 190 as well as 199 subsection 3. The Senate approves senators.
Na sasa mtazamaji, hebu tuangazie mahojiano ambayo tuliweza kufanya na mchanganuzi wa masuala ya kisiasa Profesa Tom na Mwamba kuhusiana na uamuzi ambao umeweza kufanywa na spika wa bunge la kitaifa Moses Wetangula kuambatana na idadi ya wabunge katika bunge la kitaifa. Je, ni mrengo upi ambao una idadi ya juu zaidi ya wabunge katika bunge hilo? Kumbuka umekuwa ni mjadala mkali wiki nzima, huku kila upande ukiendelea kuvutia upande wao, lakini leo hii spika Moses Wetangula ameweza kutoa uamuzi kwamba ni upande wa Kenya Kwanza ambao uko na wabunge au idadi ya juu zaidi katika bunge hilo. Hiyo ina maana kwamba ndio watakuwa wanatoa kiongozi wa walio wengi katika bunge hilo, na walikuwa wamependekeza mbunge wa Kikuyu Kimani Ichung'wah kuwa kiongozi wa walio wengi katika bunge hilo la kitaifa. Hebu tazama mahojiano ambayo tulikuwa tumeyafanya hapo awali na Profesa Tom na Mwamba. Naam, shukran sana mtazamaji kwa kuendelea kutazama Mwanzo TV, na sasa umewadia ule wakati wa mahojiano ambao tutakuwa tunafanya na Profesa Tom Namwamba ili aweze kutuchanganulia kuhusiana na uamuzi ambao umeweza kuafikiwa na Spika wa Bunge la Kitaifa nchini Kenya Moses Wetangula kusema kwamba muungano wa Kenya Kwanza ndio una idadi kubwa ya wabunge katika bunge hilo la kitaifa, na ni mahojiano ambayo tutakuwa tunafanya kwa lugha ya Kiingereza. So thank you so much Professor for giving us this opportunity so that we can have a one-on-one interview with you and dissect the determination that has been made by the National Assembly Speaker Moses Wetangula. So first things first, from where you sit, both politically and constitutionally, who controls the National Assembly?
Thank you very much for your question. Let me start by saying that for the first time in the history of this country, we had two strong competing parties which were not competing as independent, distinct parties. They were competing as coalitions. We had one Kenya Kwanza coalition, although its candidate ran as a distinct party presidential candidate. He did not run as a Kenya Kwanza presidential candidate, but it is a coalition, a conglomeration of various parties that formed Kenya Kwanza. Then we had the Azimio coalition, in which it is presidential candidate didn't run as a candidate of a distinct party, ODM, but he ran as the presidential candidate for Azimio coalition. In these coalitions, there are quite a number of formations. Some of these formations are resulted out of the perception, especially among the small political parties, of the dominant views about each one of these two coalitions, and which could give them a leverage in winning the election. And that's how you find that in areas where people perceived Azimio to be a bit stronger as a wind, and they knew if they ran without collapsing themselves into a coalition, they were likely to lose because people subscribed to the presidential candidate of Azimio. Likewise, in the areas that were predominantly Kenya Kwanza. But there were also candidates who ran as independent candidates. But besides running as independent candidate, because of that perception of the popularity of a presidential candidate in those areas, they anchored their candidacy, however independent, on supporting the presidential candidate of a particular coalition. For example, if you ran in Luo Nyanza as an independent candidate, and you anchored your support on Kenya Kwanza presidential candidate, you are likely to lose. But if you anchored your support on the presidential candidate of Azimio coalition, then the chances are, if you are popular, you are likely going to win, because you are not against their perceived presidential candidate. But those candidates ran as independent, and when they win election, they have the privilege to exercise their prerogative as individuals to decide which coalition to support when it goes to National Assembly. And quite a number of these independent candidates decided after winning the election that they were going to support Kenya Kwanza. After Kenya Kwanza winning election, of course, you know that in a power game and political game, each candidate will not want to sail in empty ocean. He will want to sail where power is. So majority of them identified themselves with Kenya Kwanza. But also, there were some political parties, small political parties, which out of the perception that I've told you, they decided to align themselves with certain coalitions. However vague the argument was. In those coalitions, if the party remained as part of that coalition, if the party remained as part of that coalition, and a candidate who won election on that party decided to cross over to the other coalition, then that party has the right to recall that candidate. They can nullify the election. On the basis, if the party complained, they could nullify the election. But there is another scenario which is unique in this country, that there are some political parties which decided after election, they won election by association, but they moved as a whole party, like UDM, moved as a whole party, saying that our principles are not in tandem with Azimio anymore. And Azimio has not given us space which we should be accorded as a coalition party. So they decided that I think we will move to a party that can work with us. So they moved as a party, not individuals, as a party. And I believe that the universal principles that bestow certain rights and freedoms on individuals cannot be suffocated by political association. There is one basic principle of the human freedoms and liberty, that even if the majority were against what you stand for, and you stood for that, you are better than standing by the majority who negates your principles than being with them when your principles are being suffocated. So these parties and the individual independent candidate deciding that right now we are making a decision which coalition to work with, and we are going to work with this coalition, gives them that right. It is a natural right, okay? It's a natural right. It gives them that right which cannot be taken away by political association. Remember, I'm talking about the rights bestowed on individuals and the right, a political right by association. You cannot be forced to stay in a political association which you feel you cannot fit, especially if you move and you have no debt on the other side, apart from a political agreement which negates the principle of your liberties and freedom. And so in that context, the number of people who crossed over after the election to work with His Excellency the President, they have all the rights, and their rights as individuals, holistically or individually, supersedes the right of political association. And so, to me, their movement cannot be denied on the basis of political association. Because what does it befit a conglomeration of political parties in the name of a coalition if you insist on keeping me, and when it comes to passing any motion or bill in Parliament, you know for sure I will not stand by you. So you still know that I have already moved in principle, but you want physically to be seen to be with you. And I cannot attend your meetings. I cannot contribute to an agenda in your coalition. And I do not want to be forced, because by you forcing me, you are actually suffocating and trampling on my freedoms and liberties of association, of opinion, and of speech.
And then yesterday we saw the president making an impromptu visit to the National Assembly, where he ate lunch with a section of members of parliament. Did that influence in any way this determination by the Speaker of the National Assembly, or it is just a spin by members of the Azimio?
Victor, I want to tell you that political governance and political hegemony is anchored on numbers. It is anchored on numbers. There is no president anywhere in the world who would want to command a minority that will lead to the frustration of his agenda in Parliament. If the president does not command the majority in the National Assembly, every bill that the government will bring up, even if it is good for this country, the majority who are against him will shoot down that bill. And it will not only be for the suffering of the president in power, it will be for the suffering of the common person whom those bills intend to serve. And so in a country like Kenya, which is actually watered down by feuds that cannot be anchored on reason, feuds that are founded on the basis that even if what he's doing is good and it is not us doing, we will not support it. The common person will continue suffering, but in a situation where the president feels that there is a room for me to marshal the majority so that I can make my agenda for this country work, then the president, I think he has all the political rights as an individual who wants to control this country and make sure that his agenda pass, to welcome anybody. And after all, what His Excellency the President said was very, very simple when he won the election. He said he's not a president of Kenya Kwanza. He's a president of all Kenyans. But there is a section of Kenyans in parliament who would want to frustrate his agenda for this country. And what does he do? He welcomes those in National Assembly who feel they want to be part of his success in serving this country. And he will welcome them. I am sure that even if the presidential candidate of Azimio decided that he's crossing over to join UDA or to join Kenya Kwanza, I think the president will welcome him. And he has already said it, that he's willing to give him responsibilities under certain condition. And one of the conditions is that he's not going for handshake. But he's willing to give him opportunity to serve Kenya alongside himself. And I think that is positive, that the president is trying to say, give me a chance to prove that I can fix this country. Give me a chance to prove that whatever was perceived to be impossible, it is actually possible.
And in today's Daily Nation newspaper, the headline is, why is President William Ruto fighting so hard to control the National Assembly? And Professor, I'm going to pose the same question to you. Why do you think President Ruto is very determined to control the National Assembly, in your opinion?
You know, we have three arms of government. We have the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. All these arms, although they are independent, they are connected at the center. If they collapse to be connected at the center, the country collapses. The legislature, it passes bills, it makes law. It makes law and it passes motions that makes it possible for the country to thrive, to grow, to prosper. The president is the executive with an agenda that he wants to achieve for this country. The judiciary must help the president in realization of his agenda by ensuring that all the social and economic and political vices being committed by crimes, they are stamped out for him to achieve his agenda. And for him to make sure that the agenda goes through and it can be implemented, that agenda will not just come from the executive. That agenda must pass through the legislature. And once the legislature endorses it, then it can be executed. Without that, he cannot. And without commanding the majority in the National Assembly, it is an attempt in futility.
Finally, Professor, how do you rate the performance of President William Ruto in this very short time that he's been in office?
Remember, the president comes in an office with a country that needs to be turned around. The rate of unemployment among the youths, it is unbearable. We have achieved a lot on infrastructure, but the unemployment problem, the level of poverty in this country, the collapsed agricultural sector, the high cost of living, fuel and basic commodities, and given that the president promised people that he actually wants to lead a country that listens to the voice of Wanjiku, the common mama mboga and boda boda person, that the commoners in this country can also be able to put 3 meals on a table in a day. You come in a country at that time, and then the drought is also hitting hard in the northeastern part of our country. Animals, cattle are dying, and all types of animals are dying because of drought. And so there are a lot of problems. And so the president is trying just to navigate around. That's why I believe the president had to take himself, to take some time to reflect upon the nature of problems and how he can address these problems. That's why he took a lot of time even before naming his cabinet. He has taken that time. He will maybe take another lot of time to name the principal secretaries even after they are recommended to him. Because what he's looking at, people who can deliver and save this country from collapse. And so far as I can say, if I look at his choice of the cabinet, most of them are people who have come from lowly backgrounds. They have come from lowly backgrounds. They understand when you talk about somebody sleeping hungry. Most of them understand. If you talk about somebody having walked without shoes to go to school, they understand. If you talked about somebody having gone to school without breakfast, they understand. If you talk about using public means, they do understand. And so these are people who knows the problem. And I believe if we give the president the opportunity and the team he has chosen, I have a lot of confidence that he can put this country on path. These first few days, it is hardly 1 month, has been days of understanding the environment, the geo structures of our economy, and how, and that's why he's moving to deal with. He has moved to with the credit bureau to see how he can save people from suffocation there, because some people have been able to be told, we can employ you, but bring us a certificate from the credit bureau. You have borrowed from, I don't know, you call it Fuliza, ama Mulika Mwizi, I don't know, whatever it is. They have borrowed there. And so you go to the credit bureau, you find your name there, they cannot give you. You get a certificate, we say you are highly indebted. Who will employ you? Things have been hard. And I'm praying, and I believe and I have confidence, that before we start judging the president, let's give him at least 3 to 6 months. And within those period, he would have put structures in place. And I believe that the structure he's putting in place will be operational. It will be a supporting structure, not a subservient, docile structure that cannot create ideas to help the president realize the objective goal of leading this country. But
Naam, huyo ni Profesa Tom Namwamba hapo akitufafanulia kuhusiana na uamuzi ambao umeweza kufanywa na spika wa bunge la kitaifa nchini Kenya, Moses Wetangula. Na tukisalia nchini Kenya, japo katika idara ya mahakama, ni kuwa mahakama kuu nchini Kenya imeweza kumhukumu mbunge wa Sirisia John Waluke kifungo cha miaka 67 gerezani ama alipe faini ya zaidi ya shilingi bilioni 1. Hii ni baada ya mahakama kuu kutupilia mbali rufaa ya mbunge huyo pamoja na mhukumiwa mwenzake Grace Wahungu kuhusiana na kesi ya sakata ya mahindi katika shirika la NCPB. Hebu sasa tuangazie swala zima la vyakula vya GMO nchini Kenya. Na mashirika ya kiraia nchini Kenya sasa yanaitaka serikali ya Kenya kurejesha marufuku ya vyakula vya GMO jinsi ilivyokuwa imewekwa Novemba mwaka wa 2012. Mashirika hayo yanashikilia kuwa kando na kuwa hatua hiyo inaweza kusababisha madhara kwa afya ya Wakenya, itaharibu soko ya mimea asili. Tazama.
Press release, our statement, a call to respect and protect Kenya's food system, stop GMOs. We are greatly disappointed by the Cabinet's decision to lift the ban on the cultivation and importation of genetically modified organisms into Kenya, which was put in place 10 years ago. The ban was put in place through a cabinet memo on 8 November 2012, following concerns over the safety of genetically engineered foods. And for the last 10 years, there has been no need to import or allow open cultivation of genetically engineered foods, as the country has been able to make do without GMO. I'd like to express the following concerns on this decision.
More than 80% of farmers in Kenya are small-scale farmers. And as we remember, during the COVID period, the closed borders and other export barriers brought a very, very important aspect of the need to embrace local production and consumption. Opening the import market of GMOs will not form a solution, as our local trade will be at risk. We note also that there's a growing global export market, especially also on
civil society organizations, CSOs, that is. It's not a rocket science to deduce on whose behalf the NPA operates. For consumers to easily recognize the
Na rais wa taifa la Kenya William Ruto yuko nchini Ethiopia kuhudhuria hafla ya uzinduzi wa kampuni ya mawasiliano ya Safaricom. Rais Ruto amefanya mkutano na mwenyeji wake Waziri Mkuu Abiy Ahmed. Katika kikao hicho, rais ameelezea haja ya ushirikiano wa mataifa ya bara la Afrika kwa lengo la kuimarisha hadhi yake ya kimataifa.
Oh, okay. Have we met? Yeah. Okay.
Before 2 years, where
it was unique in its kind, and also for my team to tourism service. We have discussed about security, about conflict in the northern part, his involvement, his country's involvement. He said, I took it 100%. So we have discussed on wheat export.
Na naibu wa rais wa taifa la Kenya Rigathi Gachagua ameandaa mkutano na ujumbe wa Umoja wa Mataifa afisini mwake jijini Nairobi na kuzungumzia kuhusu kujitolea kwa serikali ya Kenya Kwanza katika kukabiliana na baa la njaa linaloendelea kushuhudiwa katika baadhi ya maeneo nchini Kenya.
Karibuni sana. Your Excellency, the blessing of the great democracy of the United States of America and your team.
Thank you.
I want to take this opportunity to welcome you to our office here, and we are delighted to host you. And we want from the very onset to say that we are very happy that you have settled down very quickly and started very robust engagement with our government and the people of Kenya. And we have no doubt in our mind that with the keen interest you have shown by settling down very quickly and started engaging us, this will enhance the very good relations between Kenya and the United States of America. We enjoy very, very good relations with the United States, and the United States is our greatest trade partner in the world.
Yes.
And we are happy that with the robust engagement you have started with us, this will enhance trade for the mutual benefit of the people of the United States and this republic. And we want to tell you you are very much welcome to this country.
Thank you.
And other than enhancing our
Na magavana nchini Kenya wanaendelea kulalamikia kucheleweshwa kwa mgao wa fedha kutoka kwa hazina ya kitaifa. magavana hao wakisema shughuli zimelemazwa katika kaunti zote 47. Mwenyekiti wa baraza la magavana Ann Waiguru amedokeza kuwa kaunti zinadai zaidi ya shilingi bilioni 51 kufikia mwezi Agosti. Magavana hao wanamtaka Rais wa Kenya William Ruto kuingilia kati na kutatua swala hilo.
In the new government structure, the Ministry of Devolution is not part of the ministries, and as such, the modalities of funding to the Council of Governors in the new government structure, the Ministry of Devolution is not part of the ministries, and as such, the modalities of funding to the Council of Governors will be affected.
Operations and
Na tuvuke mipaka ya Kenya na Afrika Mashariki na kuelekea nchini Burkina Faso, ambapo aliyekuwa kiongozi wa kijeshi Kanali Ibrahim Traore ameteuliwa kama rais wa Burkina Faso baada ya mapinduzi ya pili katika taifa hilo ndani ya kipindi cha miezi 6. Sasa mtazamaji, hebu nikuache na taarifa hiyo ambayo iliweza kuandaliwa katika lugha ya Kiingereza, mimi ninapofunganya virago kuondoka hapa studioni, na tukutane hiyo kesho. Captain Ibrahim Traore, who was declared president of Burkina Faso, the declaration coming less than a week after the latest coup in the West African country, and the second in less than 9 months. The spokesperson of Patriotic Movement for Safeguarding and Restoration (MPSR) made the declaration on national television, saying that Captain Traore will serve as the head of state and supreme commander of the National Armed Forces. Burkina Faso plunged into turmoil last week when Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Daniba, who had seized power in January, was toppled by newly emerged rival Ibrahim Traore, who headed a faction of disgruntled junior officers. Burkina is struggling with a 7-year-old jihadist campaign that has claimed thousands of lives, forced nearly 2 million people to flee their homes, and left more than a third of the country outside government control. Daniba fled to Togo following the 2-day standoff, which was diffused by religious and community leaders. Delegates from the Economic Community of West Africa States, ECOWAS, wrapped up a fact-finding mission on Tuesday and held a series of meetings with the religious and traditional leaders and Traore. Speculations has risen that Burkina's new leader may follow other fragile regimes in French-speaking African and forge close ties with Moscow at the expense of France, the region's former colonial power and traditional ally. The dramatic takeover coincided with violent anti-French protests and the sudden emergency of Russian among demonstrators. The United States has warned the junta of risks of allying with Russia, saying they condemned any attempts to exacerbate the current situation in Burkina Faso. Traore, as previously said, will stand by a pledge that Daniba gave ECOWAS for restoring civilian rule by July 2024. Victor Wanaswa, Mwanzo TV.
Ces pouvoirs sont exercés par le premier